Hey, what's up guys, Jerome here from the Bonsai Supply, and if this is your first time coming across this channel and you like bonsai, welcome, and you are in luck because that's what this channel is all about. Now if you guys are a subscriber already, welcome back and thank you so much for your support. Now before we get started in today's video, please like this video and also make sure that you subscribe to this channel so that you are always notified when a new video comes out and you don't miss anything. Alright, so for this week's video, I thought it would be fun if we got to know another species in detail. And so I chose one of my absolute favorite species to use, which is maples. And maples are so commonly used in bonsai across the world, so I thought it would be a great species to get to know. Alright, so acers is a genus of trees and shrubs commonly known as maples, and it has about 132 different species. Now what I like about maples in particularly a lot is that they can be grown in a large variety of growing zones, such as from growing zone 5 all the way to like a 9. Now what I like about maples in particularly a lot is they all vary from each other. There's not like small nuances, there's like very big nuances from one maple to like another maple, such as like trunk characteristics or like the leaf shape, the leaf size, the way that they grow. Like, do they have really thick growth or coarse growth? Do they grow very dense or do they grow more with elongated notes? So they're all very different from each other, which is really cool because you can have a ton of them. What I also like about maples in particular is that they change throughout the season. Like in the fall, they put on this beautiful fall show, and then you get to enjoy the winter silhouette. And then in the spring, when they start to break the buds and they start to grow, it's just so beautiful because you have so many different varieties throughout the year, which is really, really nice. Alright, so first off, we're going to talk about the most popular maple species used for bonsai. And I think that we can all agree that the trident maple comes in on the very, very top because it is used or can be used in a very wide variety of climates. It is readily available, easy to care for, fast growing, and those are all the characteristics of a very good bonsai, right? Right next up to it is the Japanese maple, of course, because once again, it is very easy to care for. It is readily available as well. There's so many different cultivars that you can train and grow as a bonsai. So I would say that the trident and the Japanese maples are the most used maples for bonsai. Alright, so next up we're going to have to talk about the trimming and the styling, and this applies pretty much the same for all maples across the board. There's a few small nuances, but in general they're all treated the same way. So there's 4 major time of the years where we would actually like work or wire a maple. And so the first one would be in early spring, before bud break. We can wire the maples, we can do small trimmings, nothing major that time of the year. And then the second time of the year would be in the spring when the first flush of growth has pushed out and has turned to hardwood, which we refer to as hardened off in the bonsai community. So that will be the second time, and that second time in the spring when the first flush of growth has hardened off, it is an excellent time to come in and do some large chops, like do some trunk chops, remove larger branches. You can also apply some wire at that time as well, or we would do the first trimming back. Once the first flush is hardened, we would trim the maples back. Now the third time would be in the middle of the summer when the maples have gone into like that dormancy period. We will go ahead and defoliate the maples, wire them, style them, trim them. That's also a good time to once again do large trunk chops or remove larger branches in that summer dormancy. There's a few species of, especially Japanese maples, mostly some of the dwarf species, that do not like to be defoliated in the middle of the summer, and you'll really quickly realize which ones don't like to be defoliated. Like for instance, the Kurohime is a dwarf variety that I have that I defoliated last summer. I did not know much about it. I defoliated it in the summer, and it just didn't come back with new growth for the rest of the year, which kind of freaked me out a little bit because I was like, oh my God, did I just kill it? But that's just some Japanese maples have that characteristic. They do not like to be defoliated in the middle of the summer. However, now this year in early spring, it budded out again. So it's perfectly normal. So don't be alarmed if your maple does not bud back after summer defoliating. Do not do it again. So I learned my lesson with this one. I will no longer defoliate it in the middle of the summer. Lesson learned. So now the next time would be the fourth time that we would touch a maple would be in the fall, which is probably one of my favorite times to work on maples. I wait until they have, until the fall show has reached its peak, the leaves have started to crinkle and they start to fall off on their own. That's when I kind of go through the trees like this with my hands and all the leaves will fall off, and that's another good time to go ahead, wire the trees, style them, remove some medium and smaller branches, and just set the tree up for the winter silhouette that you can get to enjoy through the rest of the year. Now these are the 4 major times that we would work on a maple, but of course in between you can of course still trim the canopy back. So you have your canopy, new growth kind of comes out. Let that new growth harden off a little bit before you trim it back again. So you can always trim it back in shape. Just let it grow out, let it harden, trim it back, and that's perfectly fine. Now the repotting again applies to all maples across the board. You want to wait in spring once the once the buds start to break and start to push. That's a great time to go ahead and repot them. Just make sure that once you repot them, don't let them dip below freezing again, and also keep them out of the cold, dry wind. And so usually I just repot my maples once they start to push and then set them on the ground inside of my greenhouse, keep them above 40 degrees Fahrenheit and out of the wind. And once the spring is in full swings, I place them outside. Very easy and straightforward. Now in terms of the placement for your maples, all maples are treated a little different from each other, so I cannot really tell you, and especially also depends on the climate. So this is what I do. In the spring, I take my maples, like I just said, I had them in the greenhouse after repotting, so I move them outside and I give them full sun. All of them, I put them out in full sun, and then as soon as like the midsummer hits, some of the maples, the outer leaves, they start to get a little sunburned or scorched. And that's when I know, oh, this type of maple does not like to be in full sun. And at that point, I would take that maple and move it somewhere where it gets afternoon shade. So I still give them morning sun and then afternoon filtered light or shade, and then the crinkled leaves disappear. But I have a few Japanese maples, for instance, that love to be in full sun throughout the entire year. But then I have a few other maples that do not like to be in full sun. And so I know now, after the first year, oh, I'll just move them into afternoon shade, and that's perfectly fine. And in the fall, when the temperatures cool again a little bit, I take all of my maples once again and I put them out into full sun. Now, last but not least, we have to talk about the care and maintenance, and we're going to talk about things such as watering, fertilizing, and pests and diseases. Now, in terms of watering, throughout the winter time, I like to keep my maples slightly moist, almost on the verge of drying out. Once they start to bud out, I make sure that they get a little bit more water, but once again, not soaking wet. But then once they start to fully leaf out and start to really push, like actively push, that's when I want to make sure that I do not let them dry out again. Maples love to have a lot of water throughout the growing season. The more they push, the more water they need. When you defoliate them, when you remove all the leaves in the summertime, you can back off the watering a little bit, keep the tree in the shade until it is fully leafed out again, and then ramp up the watering again. I have a very simple rule, no active growth, not a lot of water, almost no water. If there's actively growth for all trees, I need to water a lot more to keep up with that growth. So next, fertilizing. So I use our all-purpose fertilizer, which is a chemical fertilizer, slow release, 18410. And I use that fertilizer for all of my maples when they are young and they have a lot of growing to do, like thickening up to do, or they have to push out a lot of growth. But then once they reach this stage of this Japanese maples that I have, the Kurohime that I started last year, and you see how it has all of the fine twigging. So for this tree, I would not use the chemical fertilizer. Instead, I will switch over to our organic fertilizer, the 835. Back off a little bit, that high nitrogen, and just slow down a little bit and get more of that. We call that organic fertilizer like a maintain fertilizer. So you see how many branches I have. I don't want them to thicken up and push as much anymore. I want to maintain the growth. So on that one, I would use the organic fertilizer. Very simple once again. They need a lot of growth. They need to have a lot of firepower. You need to maintain, change to the organic fertilizer. Very simple and very straightforward. Now in terms of the pests and diseases, like maples are prone to getting powdery mildew, aphids, and leaf hoppers, just to name a few. And so this is what I do to prevent my trees from getting any sort of pest or disease. Once I move them outside and once the leaves have like pushed out, that's when I will go ahead and use like two different chemical insecticidal sprays that, you know, attack different things. So like I use a miticide, and then I also use another one that, for instance, the Tall Star is a great chemical spray that takes care of a lot of these issues such as aphids or leaf hoppers. And so I rotate throughout the sprays on a monthly basis, but I spray on a preventative basis. Every single month I spray all of my trees, and that prevents any pests or diseases to get to my trees. Once I have some sort of disease on my tree, it is so difficult to figure out what it is and how to get rid of it. And it weakens the tree, so it will set you back in terms of growing your trees and developing your trees. You might even lose some branches. So I spray on preventative care. I never have to deal with any sort of fungus or any disease or any pest like that, which is phenomenal, and that's how I take care of my maples. So this is it for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video on the maple specific species, and I hope that you guys learned a lot. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, just drop them down below. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.